Okay, guys, we are back today with the Coach Track podcast. And today, me and Dan Williams are very fortunate to be joined by Rhod Jones. Rhod, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd love to know a little bit more about you, a little bit more about your journey into this space. And then, come on, guys, let's have a deep dive into X. Let's have a deep dive into helping solopreneurs, whatever it is. Rhod, thank you so much for joining us. Let's dive in.
Thanks guys for having me on. It's been a long time coming, but finally we managed to get a date in the diaries.
Great stuff. So, Rhod, obviously, when me and you spoke, this is the first thing that catches my eye when you look at your X account is the ex-professional rugby player. Tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, I come from a long tradition of probably a rugby playing family, all been involved in the game from a very young age, particularly started from my father and then obviously my uncles, etc. And I come from a small village in South Wales called Trebanos, which is about 8 miles from Swansea. And it's a typical Welsh village that everything centres around rugby, the local rugby club. But then from there, we've had that passion basically that's come from my dad. Really, he's instilled it in us. And then we all followed a career in rugby, initially playing for the local team. And then fortunately, we all went on to achieve representative honours. Also myself and my middle brother went on to play professional rugby for a number of years. My middle brother's a lot more successful than I was. You know, he was a British Lion. He had 50 odd caps. So he he inspired me to achieve what I did. But obviously, I didn't achieve the accolades that probably I set out at an early age. But I certainly enjoyed the professional career for 10 years. You know, I met some fantastic coaches and obviously even better friends. And yeah, it's something that stayed with me up until now as well. I'm coaching a local team again in just down the road there. So it's always been in my life and it's always been a part of me. And yeah, it's given me so many opportunities and I've learned so much from it as well. And where it's taken me through into my solopreneur career or my business career. And I've taken a lot of them learnings into where I am now. So yeah, it's something that I hold dear to my heart, and it's something that again, it's been 40 years probably that I've had rugby in my life.
Amazing. It's such a great answer, and I absolutely love that. There's one coincidence that all three of us have got is sport, fitness, ability, whatever it is. And I honestly think that the physical comes before the mental, if that makes sense. Let's say that, we're talking about having like a, mental issue or whatever that might be in the UK. I think actually to cure that, a lot of that comes from the physical first. Dan's really into his elite cycling, you're into rugby. I come from a sporting background, and I think that's the sort of fundamentals that allow you to create those building blocks and those stepping stones to progress in this sort of business, isn't it? That, do you agree with that? Do you think that, like, coming from a sporting background, creating those principles puts you in a good stead and in a good position to fly, to do really well in the online space?
I mean, yeah, I have noticed a lot of social media people are actually from a sporting background, as you said. Obviously, it creates discipline. It's not as hard to create a post as it is to maybe win a rugby match or something like that. So it puts it into perspective. Like you're more likely to be able to do it for a long time, stay consistent, make progress, and also have failures as well, because social media isn't all about making progress. You are going to have flop posts, weeks where you lose followers, stuff like that. And it does transfer from sport, I would say, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And I definitely think, the physical comes before the mental, and both of them need to go hand in hand, especially in this space, if that makes sense. And I see the ones that are really successful almost go about it from an athlete's mindset. That's even if it comes to creating 30-day schedules or creating a business plan over a year, that periodization or whatever it might be, looking at something as a season. Even me and you don't do that, don't we? As we're preparing a school community, I'm almost looking at it and time blocking it as if it's a sports season. So, Rhod, tell us a little bit more about that. Is the building blocks, the principles of your online business built on that background from rugby? And tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think you've got to have that element of discipline. As a professional rugby player, you basically went in the mornings, 6 o'clock in the morning. You did your gym sessions, you did your field sessions and stuff. So without any kind of discipline obviously and motivation, you'd struggle to maintain that kind of lifestyle. So it's definitely laid the foundation for me going into a business career. Unfortunately as well, I didn't really understand how important systems were when I was playing. I was very much of the mindset that more meant better, and the more I did, the better I'd become. That became such a detrimental aspect of my career because, again, going back to my brother was 7 years older than me, and he was one of those that, he achieved so much in the game, and he was probably my rugby hero growing up anyway. And then the more achievements he had, they just went on to the bottom of the list for me, really. The list got longer and longer. I went to achieve so many things at a certain time. And the only way I realized that, thought I would be able to achieve that is if I just trained harder and trained more. And I didn't have any kind of method to my approaches a lot of the time. And what compounded that as well was the numerous injuries I had. I always had this ticking clock that, time was against me. And as any sportsman, you only have a shelf life of 10, 12, 15 years if you're lucky. Professional rugby now, the career shelf life is diminishing as we speak. When I was playing, the game wasn't as physical as it is now, but yeah, you only had 12, 15 years if you were very lucky to achieve everything that you had to. And then you throw injuries in that kept you out for 6, 12, potentially 18 months sometimes, So then that was slicing off your career as well. So with that, it became a element of desperation. And that's where I wish I had a bit more of a handle of systems and how better to utilize them through recovery, whether that was through recovery from injury or through recovery from training or performance. But I went completely against that. And yeah, I was overtraining. I was overthinking things. Everything was to the excess. And when it came to where it mattered then, when contracts were coming up and, when big performances were needed and stuff, my performances did suffer. And then it became like a spiral effect then that I become more and more anxious and stuff. Then I start training even more to try and counteract, the kind of performance deficiencies. I was looking at more that I need to do more rather than doing less. And so going back to the question, discipline, yes, you have to have that discipline to keep and have that motivation to keep going. What I've learned through business now is less is so much more like less is more basically, and you have to have that kind of um, elements of when you need to push and when you don't need to push, when you need to step back, when you need to step forward. Unfortunately, I didn't have that during my rugby career as much as I should have, which ultimately cost me a lot of opportunities I see. And yeah, I didn't achieve what I wanted to. But that's probably the biggest learnings I've had, being a professional sportsman, it's giving me that drive and that focus, but it's having the systems in place that make such a difference now. And that's what I'm utilizing in my business on a day-to-day basis, particularly as a remote worker and a solopreneur as well, because you are left to, it's only down to you really. And unless you do things, everything suffers. Your family, your business, your well-being. It just goes on and on.
Rod, that is such a powerful story, and there's so much that we can take from that, and so many great ways to almost reframe that and put that as advice, if that makes sense, to upcoming entrepreneurs or solopreneurs or people working online. The idea of social comparison theory, that we're always thinking that we're in the limelight of others or comparing ourselves to others. I learned that a long time ago, not to really worry if I'm Mosey, with Stephen Bartlett or anyone else. I don't really care what they're doing because I'm Greg Stein. I only live in my own life. If that's the only person I'm in competition with myself. That's a bit different in sport, but in this business, I think it's very important that you set your own targets, if that makes sense. And that's a lesson that you've learned, isn't it, from your rugby? From what's in there, that you can reframe that and change that mindset into this sort of business. The other thing as well, is what sport teaches you is that making setbacks a comeback, if that makes sense. The idea of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, all those sort of aspects. And that, I know you're absolutely can't wait to put your teeth into this, but there must be so many hooks, so many ways that you can put those life experiences, those stories into storytelling and social media. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a powerful story. And I was just thinking through the whole time, I was like, why haven't you talked about this in your content? Why haven't I seen this on Twitter before? Because it's you're missing out a lot and people also are missing out on hearing that story from you from that, because obviously at the moment you're sharing tips, you're giving advice, which is obviously good, but it's also what a lot of people do, which is less good, because you need to be able to back it up with stories. And when you have got those stories and that experience, you need to use that as much as possible. And especially if you can resonate with people who are also rugby players, stuff like that. That would also mean that you get clients that you like more, and you repel people who aren't interested in the things that you are interested in. So it's kind of like an extra bonus on top of that. But yeah, I'm thinking like LinkedIn would absolutely love a story like that, where you have got through a hard time and you've learned a lesson, you've made mistakes, and you've got something to advise people on in the future.
Yeah, I think my existing LinkedIn platform, I go on it periodically. I'm not consistently on it, but that is obviously something I'm definitely going to change, because yeah, that's it's an audience that you need to to target. But because again, I think a bit of a backstory as well is growing up in the shadow, I guess, of my older brothers, who went before me and achieved a fair bit in rugby. Then I always had that kind of, how can I say it? People always looked at me then as if I was sort of privileged, I guess. People think that, if you do progress in your career, it's on the back of a name, or, there's some nepotism that goes on and stuff. And during my early schoolboy career, really, I experienced a lot of negativity around that. Not as much as probably I laid on myself. I was thinking probably it was a lot worse than it really was, but it really did affect me when people did shout that out to me, or, or just really target that, where, or you're only here because of who you are, or your brother and stuff. So that type of thing then made me feel I wanted to push myself in the background and not take a step forward and get into the spotlight. And for about 3 or 4 years, I really did, how can I say, put the rugby dreams one side. And I thought, is this what I really want? If I am going to progress and achieve the accolades that my brothers achieve, would I be prepared to take this type of criticism, judgment, or whatever? So for 3 or 4 years, I really stepped back. But even though then I made the decision that I wanted to really progress, when I was about 17 or 18, I made the decision, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to be a professional rugby player. I want to achieve X, Y, and Z. Because I was playing, that allowed me then to use that as a little bit of a defense. I could go out in the rugby feeling that was my kind of escape. But then once I finished playing rugby, I had that fear. I still had that fear deep down that if I did put myself out there, if I did start exposing myself, or exposing myself to a wider audience, how I would be able to accept that criticism. I think we spoke in our initial chat, Greg, maybe about not wanting people knowing what I'm doing, and put myself out there on social media and things. And for about 15 years after I finished playing rugby, I wanted to create an online business. I wanted to be a successful solopreneur or business owner. I was petrified of putting myself out and putting myself in front of people and just having a waiting to hear that criticism start landing, or start, people start. So, and it took about 15 years really until last January, the turn of the year, where I thought, I can't keep on doing this. It's just inhibited me so much, and it's preventing me from achieving like lifetime goals that I've had, to be successful, whether it's in business or in sport. But more importantly as well, the biggest thing was my son. And my son was getting to an age where everything I was doing was having an impression on him. And kids are so impressionable. I decided that enough's enough, and I have to take, it's a leap of faith really, say, right, and this is where I am now basically. I'm 9 months into the journey of me actually putting content about myself out there. And as you say, since you said, Dan, that you need to try and say that story. But I have had that fear, but I say I'm 9 months in, and I'm breaking down them barriers daily, I have to say. And my son comes back from school every day, and that's just a reminder to me that this is what I'm doing it for now. And yeah, getting my story out there and going back to the LinkedIn, where this would be perfect for LinkedIn. Again, I'm probably putting that information out to a lot of people who know me as LinkedIn is. So so it's breaking down that barrier really. And I think if I put a couple of posts and people start understanding actually what I am doing now, then yeah, it'll become a lot easier. But I agree, LinkedIn, I have to start exploring that avenue again, putting myself out there to people who know me personally and know my backstory, but never seen Rhod Jones as Rhod Jones being the guy now who's starting to tell his story and being open about things.
Both so powerful. And obviously, everyone's story is different, but I resonate with that a little bit. You know, if you think about, I openly don't talk about what my career was and what I've done. I openly don't talk about my wife. I sort of sit in line, and I hate the idea of what my friends and family know. But then I've also learnt not to care, if that makes sense, because my desire for a great lifestyle, to live in Bali, to have a remote business, to create something for me and my wife is far greater than anyone's comments. Um, those stories, that journey that you've got is so incredibly powerful, and the storytelling of aspect could be everything for you. I have a task for you. The average remote worker gets distracted every 11 minutes. It takes 23 minutes for them to refocus. 80 minutes in a rugby game. The guy knows all about plays. He all knows about strategy. He knows about, you know, crime management, etc., etc. Dan, how would you reframe, repurpose that sort of information, that sort of background, the experiences that Rodri's got across multiple platforms to resonate with like-minded people? How many sportsmen, for example, looking for something after sport, for example, or how many people who've played sport who are into business resonate with scenarios in rugby, for example? Dan, how would you use that?
I mean, I think looking at comments on your current post is a big thing for me, is seeing what people want to know more about, what are they asking questions about, and how can you link the answer to that question from a failure or an experience that you've had in the past um, in a future post. That's pretty much how I get 80-90% of my ideas is from comments from other people. And I think going back to being scared of getting like negative comments, I don't think there are really very many negative comments on Twitter or LinkedIn, to be honest, because either people don't care or they think, oh, this is brilliant, this is for me. So I think the worst case is people don't care and they scroll. And I think that is worth risking to help more people with your experience.
Again, I see a lot of my friends from the rugby world and stuff, and they share their life and everything else on social media anyway. So you know, it's not it's what people expect now, you know. And as you say, I look at stuff and ignore half of it. I'm probably ignore 90% of it, and then there's some that you know that resonate with me. But again, I think that's where people are, and people have their lives to worry about. There's so much going on in everyone's life anyway, rather than just, you know, what you post. And as you say, some will resonate. And once that, you know, if that does, then, you know, exactly that, you know, you can get, you know, potentially some engagement and stuff. But the rest of the stuff, you say people will just ignore it and get on with their lives. And that's where I've arrived at now as well. You know, that, you know, people are so engrossed in their own life that it doesn't really matter what you put out there, and it only lasts, you know, it's in the ether for so long and people forget about it and then they just move on. So, you know, I've definitely broken down some huge barriers to try and put my story out there. And, you know, I ventured into X now, and I've, you know, devoted a lot of time to that. And the big thing I've learned as well is that it's all about consistency. And regardless if posts actually flop, you don't get any engagement. It's just making sure that you keep pushing content out there, and some will resonate, some won't, and then some will just pop as well. And you don't know what then posts or what that content will be. But I do get that authenticity is important, because I look at some of the so-called gurus on the different social media platforms, and they all say, you know, certain posts work, but you know, but everything seems to be so samey, isn't it? As well, you know, it's all platitudes and it's all these one-liners, and you know, and it's just basically there's nothing there really. And there are some people that do it really well, but majority, if they are looking, they're trying to work the algorithm rather than build a following. And yeah, that's the key. But there's some stuff I probably not sharing it enough, or I'm not saying it in the right way for it to really hit with people. But you know, I'm starting to push stuff out that I do on a daily basis and the challenges I face, but maybe I should be doing that a lot more, which is where, you know, that's the whole idea of being a learning curve and just growing daily and getting better at it, the long and short.
Again, there's so many ways to go with that. And the idea of being worried about what other people say, or looking at other influencers and what they're saying. It's so important sometimes just to look in and to look at yourself and what your demands are. One thing me and Dan learned about in the coach trap and what we try and teach to others is not so much about algorithm or not so much about saying what the gurus are doing, but pulling on the heartstrings, being authentic, actually talking about your own story, getting your own tribe. I think Dan Williams signed his first client after 30 followers or whatever it was, But sometimes it's not about going viral. It's not about, paid ads. It's not whatever. It's only got to have a certain amount of people to see it, and it's only got to resonate with one or two. So that's why LinkedIn's great, Instagram, Substack. That list goes on and on and on. And there's one thing that I was really thinking about all the way you were saying that in terms of psychology, is something called attention residue. So the best way I can describe that in terms of like a sporting arena is if a golfer 3 putts, and instead of hitting two and birdieing, he hits three, mucks up, loses opportunity of winning the championship. He's still got to step up and hit a 250-yard drive on the 18th hole. Let's say that you're playing rugby and you miss a tackle, but you still got to focus for the last 10, or a pass doesn't quite land, or someone sidestepped you or whatever, and there's still 6, 7 crucial minutes left. A remote worker will, when they go into a new task, will still be focusing on the last task. Okay, that's what attention residue is. I actually think those experiences that you've got, and it's especially what we're talking about, the experiences of social comparison theory, you can use that. So many people will resonate with that. That pulls on the heartstrings, Dan, do you agree with that? I think that's what the coach trap is about, isn't it? That's the fundamentals, the pillars that we talk to people about, being authentic, talking your own story, resonating with your own sort of tribe. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. I know Rod said that everyone's kind of starting to sound samey, which is completely true. And I think what actually differentiates you isn't the information that you give, but it's the packaging of it, and the kind of the backstory behind it is what people really buy into. But I'm just conscious of time. I actually have a question for you, Rod. I know you said on the form that we fill out before the podcast that you're a systems focused coach, and you talk about systems a lot. I want to know what kind of systems you have implemented in the past, or what systems have helped you.
The big ones for me are basically it's following a systemized morning routine. That's big for me. It does set me up. I'm a morning person, and the big thing, remote workers, some will peak better in the afternoon, some peak in the evenings. I'm certainly a morning person. It's something I've always been, through my rugby career, etc. And I love to attack the mornings early, 5:30. But yeah, that's one of the systems. I do it like a morning prayer. I always do a morning prayer. Then I do some meditation just for me to just basically achieve some mindfulness. And then I just do like a 20, 30-minute workout, which is something I've done. Without exercise, I just don't function anyway. It just gives me that, that's the fuel that I need for, regardless how tired I am. It just flips me into work mode or whatever. I do that, and then over the last, especially with COVID, I started venturing into cold water therapy or whatever. So I do have a plunge pool at the back garden, and I just jump into that every morning as well, which I don't tend to do it in the summer months because the water isn't particularly, unless I throw tons of ice in. But when the winter months, I tend to jump in for 5 minutes, and then that basically sets me up for the day. So that's a system I follow. And also then when I start my work blocks, which usually about 8 o'clock, it's phone on airplane mode, and I even put into another room. Then I usually have 2, maybe 3 tabs open, and then I just do my deep work, then deep focus blocks for 90 minutes, 15-minute window. Then I do another 90 minutes. And then I do all my administration stuff then in the afternoon. So I batch my emails together, and then if there's any client calls that I need to make, I batch them together. And then any other administrative tasks, then it's all about batching. And then I do like a transition then from work to family time, where I either do a 5, 10, 15-minute walk around the block. So it's them type of systems that I tend to follow. And they're important to me. Then it gives me structure but the thing is as well is having that adaptability, because when you work from home, you don't know when the doorbell's going to go off, so you just have to adjust. And it's all about, and the important thing is not about separation, it's integrating. So if you can integrate, sometimes I walk my boy to, even using junior school, I used to walk into school sometimes, and sometimes I take a client call during that, which, I think and again, this is making sure that the systems you have, and then you create good boundaries around that as well. And then them are the main things that I tend to follow and have followed for the last maybe 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, so specific systems like that are perfect for, as we talked about before, lead magnets. So you could kind of batch a little part of that system. So, for example, going from work to family time, you could teach people exactly how you do that, what mistakes you've made possibly in the past. And that would be a brilliant lead magnet just to get people to trust you even more. But what you're going to need before that is people who do already trust you somewhat and they know that you are focused on your specific things. So, family, for example, which I don't see you talking about that much in your content, which you should,
No.
because obviously you're not going to go viral with that, because obviously not everyone has a family, but you are going to get more specific people who would be interested in that lead magnet and then further be interested in becoming a client. And so it's kind of just integrating, as you said, kind of that whole funnel together, something like that.
Yeah, again, I think the target audience it's very niche, and I wanted it to be because there's so many solopreneurs out there. You've got the Justin Welshes and stuff like that. They target the solopreneur market, and it's very broad. But I'm a parent who works from home. I run my own business, and I know there's a lot of people out there that do that. And it's not too big and it's not too small, and but it's something that I can resonate with, and everything I'm doing, I try and relay that in my content. Obviously, I'm not doing as well as I should, but yeah. And I think if you're in the trenches, you become a lot more authentic anyway. You're not just one of those that's just using, just saying that you experience these things, but you just totally detached from them, and you just there just. And then that's what it comes back down to as well, is having that passion for the people I want to help as well, because I know that the challenges and the obstacles, the pitfalls that come with trying to run a business as a solopreneur, running a family at home. There's all that isolation factors that you have to consider. A lot of the meetings, particularly over COVID, they were never face to face. They were one to one, and you ever had that personal touch with. So there is an element of isolation you have to deal with, and again, that's why I thought that there's people out there that have experienced these type of things that I'm experiencing, and I know how difficult it is as well to try and overcome them. So I thought, why not try and help that target market or that market, and ultimately try and grow together as well and grow that community together.
So much there to that, Dan, isn't there? One thing I picked up on straight away is I know that if you multitask, you're 40% less productive. You're talking about time booking, putting your phone to one side, et cetera, et cetera. That's the sort of stuff, that's the sort of systems that people resonate with. I think that morning routine is a great a lead map, if it makes sense, a tried and tested model system created by an ex-professional that helps solopreneurs. I think that's perfect. Anyway, Dan, I know we are a little short of time. A minute left. Anything else that you guys want to say before we go? Rhod, where's the best place to find you?
Best place to find?
Where's the best place to reach you on social media?
Email. I say WhatsApp. I know we're on a WhatsApp group, and that's absolutely fine. But I have muted about 12 other groups because it just seems to be the go-to place now, isn't it? And it's never used to be. It used to be a phone call or whatever, or even an email. But WhatsApp now, But you could get me on there. But if I can, I'll drop you my email address if you want to do that. That's probably a good. No, I'll always pick up my emails. It probably in the afternoons. As you say, I deal with them, so I'll be more than happy to get back on an email to you.
Nah, that's a good place to start. Rhod, or add your email to the caption on the post for everyone to find you. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. And remember, whatever you do, don't fall into the coach trap.